Hi everyone and welcome to my video about the 6G3 or Fianchetto Taimanov. 6th move G3 is a pretty calm and solid move. I faced it twice I think over the past few years when I was playing the Taimanov, and I do have pretty sweet memories about it. Um, Playing Michael Adams, I think in 2013 I played him twice in the tournament in the Netherlands, and I managed to beat him as white and draw him fairly easily with the line I'm about to show you. So let's get right into it. Um, After a6, bishop g2, knight f6. The other option for black in these lines is to play with d6 and bishop d7. Um, to be honest, it's always a little bit of a struggle to find something that's really satisfying against a solid setup like the g3 line, but I like my line because it's pretty forcing. Either black just equalizes comfortably or white has to allow some serious counterplay. So I prefer my line with knight f6, short castles, and knight takes d4, which is fairly logical. Black just played knight f6 to develop his knight, and also the g7 pawn is no longer under attack after queen takes d4, and he played a6 in order to stop knight b5 ideas, which is also very logical. So far black's moves are all connected, and knight takes d4, queen takes d4, bishop c5 is a logical follow-up on the current strategy. Here there's actually only two lines that you have to know about as black. So far all these moves are completely standard. In the g3 lines there's not too much of move order tricks or subtleties. White generally goes g3 in order to play bishop g2 and short castle in the next move, and he does so against pretty much anything that black does. So here we are, and I believe that the main line, or at least the critical move here, is bishop f4. So I'll start off with that because queen d3 is a bit more of an ambitious move in my opinion. Bishop f4 is a nice intermediate move attacking the black queen. Exchanging these queens would definitely lead to a slightly better endgame as white, as he's already threatening something like e5, and clearly his control of the dark squares and his rook coming to d1 with a tempo is not something that you should aim for as black. So don't change the queens here, instead play the move d6. It might seem like a bit of an achievement for white to get a tempo and forcing black to play d6, but at the same time this seems to work out pretty well for black either way. White has two options here. Queen d2 is probably the better one. Queen d3 is an interesting move, but has been neutralized to my knowledge by the nice move knight d7, which was played by a grandmaster from my generation, 1994. His name is Ray Robson. He's from the United States, and he's quite a well-known, good theoretician, even though he's quite a young player. But he's one of the players that in the Taimanov you can sometimes definitely have a look at, as he has some interesting ideas in the Sicilian overall. So anyway, he played knight d7 in this game, and the idea is pretty simple. After rook a d1, knight e5, black managed to neutralize this pressure in a pretty nice way, as his knight is placed quite well on e5. Think about normal moves like queen d2, when already white might have to cope with moves such as knight c4 either immediately, or just the threat or the idea being there is pretty annoying. And queen e2 on the other hand is also not something you're too worried about, as this completely releases the pressure on the d6 pawn. So really after knight e5 the position is already unclear to my mind. Instead, after knight d7, knight a4 is a bit more critical and has been played in that game of Ray Robson from St. Louis in 2013. The white player was Ivanov, who is another grandmaster from the United States. After e5, bishop d2, bishop d4, knight c3. Really, white doesn't have any time to take, because after knight takes, his queen and his bishop would be hanging, so that would mean a loss of a piece. So he had to remove that bishop. Bishop e3 is not too attractive either, because then the whole point of exchanging the bishops and putting a knight on a4 doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So really black is just using the fact that white's knight is temporarily not having a look at the d5 square. And after bishop d2, bishop d4, he tries to make white play c3, or we try to make white play make white play c3, which would mean that his knight is suddenly into some trouble as b5 is an idea. In the game, knight c3 was played, which is logical, but after knight f6 it turns out that even though bishop g5 looks like a nice move, we can just take on c3 now, which once again would neutralize this knight d5 idea and give us a pretty decent position, as we can just follow up with bishop e6 and enjoy a better structure. Even if white takes on f6, this pawn is still way easier to attack, so black is actually a little bit better here already. In the game, rook c1 happened, and after bishop e6 followed by rook c8, I liked black's position. I think black is having a very comfortable game here. So queen d3 is not something to worry about. Queen d2 instead is the main line, and after h6, which is an important move to remember because black's idea to neutralize this pressure is to play e5, but compared to the other line, if we would play e5 now, bishop g5 would probably be quite something a little bit annoying to deal with. I mean, you could consider playing something like bishop e6, but now these opposite colored bishop positions that might lead to an exchange after an exchange here are a little bit nasty, as white does have very nice control over these white squares, especially since black has this double pawn. So that's not something you want to allow, and you should definitely play h6 here, as black can afford to lose a bit of time on that move. Rook a1 is the normal move here. There's a little difference between rook a1 and rook fd1 that I would like to point out. After rook fd1, black has the nice option of playing e5, bishop e3, bishop takes e3, f takes e3, and now the simple move king e7 is very decent because black has time to put the bishop to e6 without being bothered with any rook takes f6 sacrifices that could have been there if he had chosen to put the other rook to d1, which is actually the main line. So rook a1 is what people usually play, and after e5, bishop e3, as you understand, we cannot do that anymore because that would lead to the exact same line once again. Rook takes f6 is now a killing move, as knight d5 check will pick up the queen as it targets both the king and the queen. So don't fall for that. Instead, play bishop e6 immediately here and allow white to take on c5, as we still have d takes c5, which also relieves the pressure of the d pawn in by recapturing it onto another square. After bishop takes c5, d takes c5, f4 is the main continuation. Something like queen d6 is once again might look a little bit better for white, but in reality really nothing's going on. We have a very nice subtlety here that you can keep in mind. After king e7 it looks like white's a little better after rook b6, but it turns out that black has this very nice move king d7, playing for the fact that after rook takes b7, king c6, the rook barely has any squares left, and I suppose it's actually trapped. So that will mean a loss of exchange for white, and after king d7, if he doesn't take, the king will come to c7, protecting that slight weakness on b7 and giving black a very comfortable position, after which he can start thinking about changing the rooks on d8, among others. So f4 is really the critical continuation, and here you should castle as black at some point. That's something you can't delay for too long. And here knight d5 is what has been seen in many games, but really to my mind this is just a line that leads to a draw and shouldn't be considered as anything dangerous anymore. Bishop takes d5, e takes d5, queen d6 in order to blockade this d6 move, which is of course something that white would really like to do. Both the d pawn is very dangerous, but also this bishop would come into play really quickly. So f takes e5, queen takes e5 is the continuation that has been seen here. And here white has two options, either c4 or d6. c4, queen d6 is, I don't think there's really that much to say about this position. I think black has a healthy blockade. He can follow up with moves like rook d8 and rook e8, and I just don't believe in white's advantage here. Even the computer thinks it's a bit better, but games have proven that black is just doing fine, and his play is natural. So you can have a look at the sample lines in the ebooks here, but it's really not something that I would worry about too much. You don't have to play rook a8, you can also play rook fd8 and put the other rook on c8 or c7. So really, there's not that much to worry about, I think, here. Instead, the more dangerous try is the move d6 here. Sorry, the move d6, after which you should accept the challenge and play queen takes b2, picking up a pawn. Here, white has two options, rook b1 or c4. c4 leads to a endgame after an exchange of queens, and after that you should probably hang on to that pawn for a little longer. Here a4 was played in order to stop black from achieving a passed pawn of his own with b5, or at least one that can be protected by another pawn. Something like b5, cb, ab followed by c4 is not something that white wants to play against, so a4 makes sense. Then rook fd8 is the logical follow-up for black. And after rook b1, b6 would be my improvement over the old game. And once again, as I said, the expert of this line is Michael Adams, who played this game against Vishy Anand, former world champion, in 2001. And even though the game ended in a draw, I didn't really like the way things turned out for black. I had the feeling that he ended up slightly worse after playing knight d7 and giving back this pawn. So instead I would go with b6, and for example after the move rook e1, rook e8, rook takes e8, rook takes e8, rook b2, rook b8, d7 is always just a matter of rook d8 and bringing the king back and regaining that pawn. Or actually regaining, just picking up that pawn, so that's not too dangerous. Rook b2, rook b8, bishop c6, a5. It looks a little bit clumsy for black, but really it's all holding on, so I don't see why you wouldn't want to go for this. Now it's time to bring in the king with king f8, so one of the sample lines is king g2, king f8, d7, king e7, rook e2 check, and king f8 back. Now black will probably plan to play rook d8 at some point, and there's just no real way for white to break through. After all, he is a pawn down, and there's just not enough in the d-pawn in order to really cause black problems. So that's about it for this line, really. This is just a general idea of how I view this try for white to get some sort of advantage, which is just not really there. Study it a little bit in the ebook, but you should be fine if you know a few of these sample lines that I give there. Then next on I want to continue to the line that Adams played against me. I think pretty clearly he shared the same sentiment when it came to his old game against Anand from 2001, and he didn't want to try and test me in my analysis there, so he played the move queen d3 after bishop c5, which is a bit more interesting as it leaves a bit more play for both sides. Here I went knight g4, another pretty typical move. As we saw before, when the knight went from d7 to e5, this is the same idea, but once again, as I said in so many other videos, it's a very nice idea for black to keep the pawn on d7 whenever you can. So knight g4 is a lot more flexible than trying to play d6 and knight d7 here in that regard. So here queen e2 is the move, bishop f4 is another move, but then once again knight e5. Shouldn't have to explain too much about this. This is very similar to what we saw in the previous line. Black is doing fine. So queen e2 is a bit more tricky. And the reason for that is that if you go knight e5, then white goes king h1 with the idea of f4. And of course that looks a little bit clumsy. If we have to go to c6 afterwards with our knight, playing knight f6 to g4 to e5 to c6 is just a big loss of time. And even though this has been played, I don't really like the positions occurring after something like this. White can play f5, which means that whenever we will try to castle here as black, f6 will definitely follow, and we'll have some kingside problems as our pieces are not really ready to do anything against it. They're not necessarily out of play, but our kingside is a little bit vulnerable in these situations. So I don't want to play knight e5. Instead, I prefer to move h5, which is a lot more tricky. One of the main ideas is if king h1, we go b5, and whenever h3 happens, usually we can just let the knight be taken because we have this idea of h takes g4, h takes g4, when the king would have to go back to g1, and we can pick up the g3 pawn. So really that's not something White wants to do. I guess I haven't double checked this, but I suppose that here this is something extremely dangerous, or maybe even immediately winning for Black. So this would have been a very big blunder by White to play h3. So it's hard for him to get rid of the knight on g4. And in my opinion, the only very serious try to achieve something is by playing bishop f3, which is definitely not a move that an average g3 Sicilian player or someone who likes to play g3 against the Taimanov would like to make, because it basically means that he's gonna try to win a pawn by taking on g4 or taking on h5, but at the same time he's sort of losing the control or the solidness in his position by taking sort of a long road to gain some material. So here I suggest to play knight e5, bishop takes h5, b5, and really this is kind of a strange side to see this bishop from g2 end up on h5 and opening up Black's h-file. So I hope you do agree with me that even though Black is not that well developed yet, there's definitely some potential in this position. This was actually my preparation against Adams, and I felt pretty confident going into this before the game. So after, for example, bishop f4, bishop b7, rook a d1, d6, I like Black's position after, well, at some point the bishop should come back to f3 and queen c6, and there are actually many ideas here. One of them is b4, a5, bishop a6. I played d6 specifically to go queen c6. Sometimes you might want to toy with the idea of playing something like f6 and g5, trying to force an exchange here. Really the thing about this position is that it doesn't really feel like you're a pawn down, because the h-file is opened up and you have a lot of activity, your pieces are well placed. You can even consider putting your king on e7 or castling queenside in some situations. I think it's just a fun position for Black to play, and that means that White has to make quite a difficult decision if he wants to face the repertoire against g3 here. He either has to go for something that is, to my mind, just extremely drawish with bishop f4, or he has to allow Black to get a very interesting position and a lot of compensation, which would definitely give you chances to play for a win. So even though, once again, White does have the option to sort of back out and make the game a little bit boring, I like this line because it doesn't give White a lot of flexibility. It's either going to be a real fight, or it's going to be something that you can simply remember without too many difficulties and easily draw. So that's about it for my g3 repertoire. Definitely have a look at some of the lines I put in, especially about this pawn sacrifice in the ebook. I didn't analyze it in great depth, but well, as far as I remember, the computer liked my idea of sacrificing the pawn. He doesn't give any specific big advantage for White, so I'm feeling pretty confident about this line, and I hope you like it as well. I think it's a very good strategy to try to provoke a g3 player with a pawn sacrifice like this. And I'll see you in the next videos, which will feature some more rare lines or old lines that are not as dangerous as the lines we've seen so far, in my opinion. So thank you for watching.